Hey gang, what's going on? Ryan, Keith, and Juan here to bring you another edition of Debate That, the show where we break down one specific topic regarding the world of professional wrestling. And for this edition, this is actually suggested by a fan of the show, Irish T. Raw, who commented on YouTube asking, could you guys do a Debate That about the Attitude Era versus the Ruthless Aggression Era? So the topic is, which was better, guys? So this right here, get the pitchforks, get everything ready, and I wanted to make sure that you guys got the best argument for each one. So talking about the Attitude Era, that's going to be Keith, because Keith, you grew up watching the Attitude Era. Is that correct?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
I hope that was your hands just in the air, and then Ryan.
I waved them like I just don't care.
Ryan, you didn't wave your arm, so... Did you feel aggressive, though, while Keith was doing that?
Ruthless aggression.
Are you going to be like John Cena taking on Kurt Angle?
There you go. That's a little bit of Attitude Era versus Ruthless Aggression right there.
Yeah, we're going to mix things
up. I'm intimidated, and that was ruthless.
So I made sure that these guys had some adequate time to really prepare themselves for this, but they don't know which one's going to be starting out. And at the very end, don't forget to comment or tweet us.
Hold on, because I like putting in that little video and that music stinger, you'll find out after this.
You just have to put that anyway. Now time magically stopped and we're back here.
Right?
That was, okay, I got a small headache.
Boom, magic.
But hey, one thing I want to make clear about this debate is that we are not talking about popularity. We all know the Attitude Era had better TV ratings than Ruthless Aggression. We're talking purely the content of both eras.
A more objective view, right? So like what constituted each era when it comes to matches, promos, the superstars, because we all know, like this is not even debatable that Attitude Era was the cool time to be a wrestling fan, right? But once you remove that, which was simply the objectively better era. So Ryan, you started talking, and you're going to talk a little bit more, because first, to talk about the Ruthless Aggression Era, we got Mr. McNulty.
All right, so why I think the Ruthless Aggression Era was better than the Attitude Era. First of all, we can talk about the brand split. That was one of the most defining traits of the Ruthless Aggression Era. And with the brand split, it allowed variety. Whereas in the Attitude Era, SmackDown kind of came in at the tail end, but SmackDown was just kind of like more of Raw. They just continue some of the stories. But with the brand split, you had two different rosters, kind of two different feels to the shows, and that made SmackDown even more worth watching than it already was in the Attitude Era. Another great thing about Ruthless Aggression was that the wrestling was simply better. I mean, you had one of the greatest rosters of all time. You had Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, Eddie Guerrero, Shawn Michaels, RVD, Triple H, so many more. There was just so many stars, and a lot of them could go. And it made for some amazing matches, and I think match quality overall was stronger in the Attitude Era. I mean, you even had Hulk Hogan in the Ruthless Aggression Era.
In the Ruthless Aggression Era, yeah, what a correct. Because you basically gave Keith a point there.
Did I misspeak
there?
Yeah,
brother.
Right.
Yeah. We got you, though. You're talking about Ruthless.
Yeah, we're talking about Ruthless Aggression. I just feel like Ruthless Aggression Era was the perfect middle ground, where Attitude Era was much more storyline based and matches were kind of so-so. It was hit or miss. And then eras of today seem like the matches are great, but the story's lacking. I think Ruthless Aggression Era was the perfect era where storylines were a big focus, but matches were also a big focus, so that you kind of had the best of both worlds going on. You still had some of the edgy storylines of the Attitude Era, but it wasn't too over the top, in your face, Jerry Springer trash TV style. They dialed it back a little bit, and that, I think, helped. Also, this was a time where the Cruiserweight division was at its height, And compared to the light heavyweight division that was kind of going on in the Attitude Era, left a lot to be desired. They really honed in on the cruiserweights that, came through WCW over to WWE, and they really made it into something that was awesome. So all that put together is why I think the Ruthless Aggression Era was a stronger era content-wise than the Attitude Era.
So you got a lot of good points there, Ryan. So first up, you talked about the brand split, and yeah, we ultimately got Raw and Smackdown, where Smackdown was debuted during the Attitude Era, but it was on the Ruthless Aggression Era that it became its own show. I mean, talk about guys like Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio, Edge. So many of them got this highlight. That tag team tournament was majestic. No Mercy 2002. That was an awesome show. It's worth pointing out that when we talk about, Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression Era, I guess we can conclude that the Attitude Era concluded around 2001, basically like pre-alliance, like that the alliance was
WrestleMania
WrestleMania
17
17.
yeah, WrestleMania 17 is the best way to really put it. And another thing you contributed to the Ruthless Aggression Era, and a lot of people forget because sometimes it's easy to mix up between that and the PG era, is that it was still edgy. I mean, Katie Vick, a lot of those things, I'm not saying that they're bad or good, because Katie Vick is something fierce, but
you're bringing that up. You're hurting my argument, man.
But I'm just talking about the edgy part, and
yes.
You can't get edgier than necrophilia on Raw TV. So, with that being said, let's go over to Keith with the Attitude Era.
So, Ryan, you said the words Jerry Springer trash TV. I believe that's a quote to talk about the Attitude Era there, and that you said that in a negative manner. Why that's actually a benefit for the Attitude Era is the fact that the world was Jerry Springer trash TV at that time, and that the Attitude Era fit perfectly in the world around it. If you don't believe me, watch one of those old shows and look at the signs in the crowd and just how it fits perfectly. Oh my god, it's so good. The signs in the attendance of the Attitude Era is its own point. But like you mentioned, we're not going to talk about popularity because if we did, the Attitude Era would win by a country mile. Let's be honest. But stars. That's what makes the Attitude Era so much better than the Ruthless Aggression Era. You have some of the biggest stars of all time coming into their own and creating some of the best moments of all time in WWE during this time. You have people like Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was the king of the Attitude Era. You had The Rock, you had Mankind, you had Triple H, you had D-Generation X, because even though the in the video packages you remember more of the Shawn Michaels Triple H DX, I would say that the more impactful version of it was the Triple H led New Age Outlaws, X-Pac, D-Generation X. They were really a staple of the Attitude Era itself. You have all that, and then you have them creating all these moments. You have the entire Austin versus McMahon feud, and every moment that came with that. You have Mick Foley getting thrown off the Hell in a Cell by The Undertaker. You have those amazing promos by D-Generation X, one of which is borderline one of the most racist things that wrestling ever did. And just all of these great moments. The match quality did lack in the Attitude Era, but it was completely overshadowed by the moments. So much so that even the low card and the mid card were so over in that time. Like, there was no, even though there was some dumb gimmicks, there was no bad gimmicks on the roster that the crowd just didn't eat up. Even people like Meat. Remember Meat? He got cheers. Val Venus was allowed to be a thing during that time. It was one of the best star-building times in history, and it saved the WWF. Saved the WWF. If there was no Attitude Era, there wouldn't be a Ruthless Aggression Era.
A lot of excellent points, and you can basically summarize it with the Attitude Era was cool. A wrestler came out to do a wrestling match at the time that wrestling was at its peak, and people loved it. You know, anybody from that roster, everybody, you talked about the signs. Almost every wrestler had a fan out there that had a sign about that guy. You could barely see the crowd. You know, you look at the game like WWF No Mercy on the N64, and that crowd was a good representation where they had so many signs in that game. And that's because that was part of the era. You were expected to do that. So now, got a couple of questions for both of you, taking it over first to Mr. McNulty, would you consider that your era, and then Keith, this is going to be the same for the Attitude, do you think that the stars made the shows, in this case Raw and SmackDown, or do you think that WWE managed to be the one that they cherry-picked who they had and made those stars? So did the stars come before the shows, or the shows before the stars?
I think the Ruthless Aggression Era was really about the stars, and this was a time before WWE stepped in and was a little too controlling over these guys, so they were able to kind of go more. The thing was, yeah, Attitude Era definitely had the most popular stars ever, but just the sheer number of stars and the match variety that you could have. The guys at the top of the card, I don't think they ever had more stars at the top of the card than they did during the Ruthless Aggression Era.
Could you name some of the top stars?
Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Chris Benoit. You can go on and on. They had Hulk Hogan even, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, if you want to go into those guys, Booker T. There was just so many names. They never had that many names than they did in the Ruthless Aggression Era. And when you just had so many people, it just, you could mix and match. It never got stale just by the sheer number of people you had. And then eventually Cena and Batista kind of came up towards the tail end, and that kind of ushered in a new era.
Now, with the Attitude Era, it was that the stars shone so bright that you needed to watch the show because of it. Like, there was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that was... everything kind of trickled down from Stone Cold. You watched Monday Night Raw every week to see what Stone Cold Steve Austin was going to do to Vince McMahon. So in that case, the star made the show. But beyond that, because you were watching Stone Cold for, sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. Because you were watching for Stone Cold Steve Austin, everybody else kind of like rised up from that. So you were watching the show for the stars, for everybody else beyond Stone Cold.
So it was almost like in the Attitude Era, that one guy factored everything in, where it feels like with the Ruthless Aggression Era, you watch wrestling a little bit more out of habit, because if you watched during the Attitude Era and you watched Monday Night Raw, you became a creature of habit that then you would just watch that. And naturally, at some point, you looked at Kevin Nash and went, hey, there's that guy from WCW. Same thing with Scott Steiner. Now, I think that the most objective way we can look at something is that if you look at filmmaking, right? Films that were in black and white, they taught and led the way for the films and the movies that we see nowadays. So the question, starting with Keith, is, what do you believe that your era left for future eras? What was such a key component of that era that in 2017 and 2018 and maybe forever, something like that will continue to happen, because that was a key component of what wrestling later on became to be the regular thing it was?
Even until today, it gave the WWE a backbone that it can always rely on. You could argue that they rely on it a little too much these days, but it built this group of stars that would set the pace from until today. And that while they're taking the time to build the new stars, the stars of the future, the stars of tomorrow, they always have these people like The Undertaker, like Matt or Mick Foley, Triple H, that they can rely on to really be the centerpiece of a show that they can use while they're taking the time to build these new stars.
What about you, Mr. McNulty?
What I think the Ruthless Aggression Era left was sort of the blueprint on how to manage a large, talented roster. Because we can look at the brand split, and immediately at the beginning of that first brand split, they had the one champion who went between two shows. Maybe they felt like that didn't work, and they realized, it's better to have two separate shows with two unique world champions. And they really laid the groundwork of, we have so many guys. How can we build all of these guys and make them relevant? The brand split. And because of the blueprint that they made, that really set the stage for the new brand split that we have in this current era. and why that has actually been very successful. I feel like the product has gotten a lot more fresh, and SmackDown has become a great, unique show again because of that. And a lot of that has to do with what they did in the Ruthless Aggression era, so that when it came time for another brand split, they could look to that as the way to make it successful.
I do agree. I think that ultimately it seems like there was this huge gap between Ruthless Aggression Era and what we got today, because there was that PG era that even you, Ryan, took a break from WWE because then it became way too PG. The stories became a lot softer. The women were relegated to basically just, divas in the most despective way possible. Because even in the Attitude Era, people love to watch Sable. Even in the Ruthless Aggression Era, you have people like Trish Stratus and Lita, and later on Mickie James. So even though there was your hot lesbian action with Eric Bischoff, not to say Eric Bischoff was involved in that, he was the one that really brought that in. You still had Trish Stratus and Lita main event Raw. And that was a historical part of wrestling, right? So that to conclude this, what would you say is the one thing that if you got to sell somebody that era on the network for $9.99, what is that one impactful storyline or match or even overall episode of Raw to just say, this is what this era is all about for me in the most selfish way possible? Let's kick it off first with Mr. Ryan.
Easy. WrestleMania 21, Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels. That is how you sell the Ruthless Aggression Era, because it defined everything. You had two of the best competitors in the era facing off, and also it showed the power of a cross-brand storyline. That if you keep two people apart long enough, you kind of build up that anticipation for when they finally cross paths. And then you had the guys jumping between both shows to continue this feud up until when they first faced off at WrestleMania. That is the perfect encapsulation of what is awesome about Ruthless Aggression, and I highly recommend you watch that match if you have not seen it.
If we're going with the most impactful storyline, it's Austin versus McMahon by a mile. Just all of the crazy moments you got from that, the beer trucks and the Zambonis and the cement-filled convertibles, all of those things really make it the greatest storyline of all time. If we're what? You don't like cement?
We're 5-year-olds, man. Leave us alone.
We are. Oh, that's fair. And if we're going for selfish reasons, the thing that I love the most about the Attitude Era is the rise of Triple H. And just how he went from this fun, like, suck it guy to really the worst heel, or like the most despicable heel in WWE history during the Attitude Era. And some of the great matches he had along the way. You could look at something like Triple H versus Cactus Jack from the Royal Rumble 2000 to really see how different the Attitude Era style was to how it is today, because you will never get that match again in the WWE, and just the crazy impactful toll that it takes on the body style matches that they used to have back then.
This is a really, really challenging topic to say who wins, because I think it's so important to factor in whether you watched it in that moment or not, because say for me right now, if I went by strictly what I watched when I did, my answer would still be the Ruthless Aggression Era. And I know some may disagree, but I've gone back to the network recently, and I've looked at a lot of Attitude Era Raws. And yes, you get your Zambonis, you get your all of that, but then there's like 80 jobber matches. There's a lot of inconclusive finishes. Like that era, it's easy to talk about the positive things. It's also really easy to talk about the offensive things, the stupid things that happen. I mean, we got a fun spot thing with Crash Holly and the Headbangers, I believe, which was easily one of my favorite things to happen on SmackDown, I think it was, of all time, in the Hardcore Championship in itself. I'm disappointed you didn't bring that up, Keith, because like that Hardcore Championship was my favorite thing for that era. But overall, objectively speaking, I think it may have to be the Attitude Era, because you talk about Triple H, you talk about Shawn Michaels, for a point, right? Because Shawn Michaels was sadly out of it, but you saw the evolution of these characters where in the Attitude Era. Yes, you got Triple H with the Evolution stable, which, took maybe a little bit too much time from the Raw episodes, but I think you got to see rich storylines out of it. You got to see guys like Edge become the rated R superstar. The guy that people said, the tag team guy is becoming like the world heavyweight champion, WWE is going to go out of business. And no, you were able to buy into it. You were able to buy the realism that was, the whole scenario with Matt Hardy and Lita. Matt Hardy gets fired. Then WWE actually capitalizes on that and excels Edge to another level. You talk about, The Undertaker becoming the guy with the streak. Because, that didn't happen during the Attitude Era. That started happening in the Ruthless Aggression Era, where they started acknowledging that. You got to see the birth of the legend killer Randy Orton. So, yes, the Ruthless Aggression Era, much like the Attitude Era, got a lot of stale things, got a lot of things that did not stand the test of time. But I think that, objectively speaking, the Ruthless Aggression Era is a little easier to get back to and is still a little bit more relevant, even if back in the day, people would watch that and say, this is not nearly as good as the Attitude Era. So with that being said, it's up to you guys now. Which one do you think made the better argument, or even regardless of the argument? If you grew up watching the Ruthless Aggression or the Attitude Eras, which one was once again objectively better? Let's not talk about the ratings, because the ratings and all the behind the scenes, all the backstage politics, that's maybe for a future topic, but definitely recommend us topics for future videos, future audio sessions. If you're watching us on YouTube, definitely drop a comment and do that. You can also like, upvote, follow, subscribe, do whatever you want, but do not forget to share this. This is for TK Tanner. Smash that like button. Let's get to 5 million likes. Why not? Let's do that. You can also support us directly on Patron. If you want to get some behind-the-scenes stuff and all that, you want to support us directly, go to Patreon. The link is right up there if you're on YouTube, patreon.com/bytethat. You get Perkimania. It's going to run wild at Patreon. So until next time, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And until next time, we'll be back with a lot more debating, a lot more thatting right here on Byte That.